Now here we are in Starfield, a game that I have covered a little bit on this channel, but not as much as I thought I would cover it before it released. And the reason for that is because I don't actually enjoy the game that much. I'm going to be going into that in this video, and people don't really talk about Starfield that much anymore. Now, of course, it is a single-player game, it's a story game, it's not going to be talked about forever. There's only so much that the developers can do to keep it sort of, popular and mainstream, if that makes sense, because obviously there's no multiplayer to keep it alive. But, so, you can never really class it, in my eyes, you can never class a sort of single-player story game as dead or anything like that, since, well, how can it be alive in the first place when there's no sort of dedicated server and player base, if that makes sense, that, sort of means a lot, if that makes sense. So, yeah, now, there are positives with Starfield. There are things I really like about the game. I remember when I first loaded it up, I was so excited when I saw this menu, just the cinematic theme and everything like that. It just sets the tone really well. So main menu, really cool. And we're going to jump into the game. So yeah, we'll just load in. Now obviously, you could argue that one of the reasons the game didn't do quite as well, and there's one of the reasons you could argue, so I was so confused by my save there because it's from Xbox, but so one of the reasons you could argue that the game didn't do quite as well is because it wasn't on PlayStation, since of course, well, if a game's only releasing on Xbox and PC, it's going to limit the amount of players that it'll go out to. So, but obviously this was a massively hyped game, so it didn't seem to affect things that much, since of course even PlayStation players were talking about this game a lot. So yeah, you can only sort of really argue about that so much. But look, one of the main reasons that the game failed, well, not failed, I don't want to say failed, that's harsh, very harsh. I'm going to put it in the title for, title reasons, but saying it failed is very harsh. Now, I have no idea what save this is really random, but one of the reasons that the game hasn't done as well is simply because of those loading screens. It's something we all know about with Starfield. It is a massive problem, and we're going to get one right now just to exit a literal building. It's ridiculous, and for a game that released in 2023, it shouldn't happen. It's an outdated style, and I mean, before the game released in the PC requirements, it said that an SSD was required for the game on PC. So, there's a reason that they say that, and there's a reason the game's not on old-gen consoles. Of course, without loading screens, it probably wouldn't be. But the reason that it requires an SSD, and I'm on an SSD right now, but it's still taking sweet time to load. And this is one of the problems with the game. It feels way too slow-paced, because the game just takes so long to load into everything. Now, of course, the better the PC, the quicker it'll be. Same with Xbox. It might be a bit quicker on Xbox, but my PC's not bad. I've got, a 3070 Ti, Ryzen 7. So, should be able to load things pretty quickly on an SSD. And now, first of all, obviously, let's talk about some positives. Graphics, beautiful. The game does look good. However, it doesn't all look good in my opinion. There are sort of areas that you can tell are generated and weren't actually sort of handcrafted, if that makes sense, since the game is so big. Obviously, the developers didn't they didn't make everything themselves. There is something that's just generated, and you can really tell. There are videos where you can easily see where that is the case and where it's not. You can practically they may as well just draw a line, where that they change it to the randomly generated lands and everything like that. You can really tell where that's the case. So, yeah, look, when I first started playing the game, I was still enjoying it, but it didn't take long for me to sort of lose interest. Now, I must admit, space-themed games, they're never my style. I much prefer, obviously, Skyrim, Fallout. Obviously, Fallout, well, I suppose it's not really space themes, but it's nothing like Skyrim. Skyrim is probably, well, I'd actually say I enjoyed Fallout 4 the most out of all the Bethesda games I've played. But Skyrim I really enjoyed. But that's just because I'm not a big fan of space theme. And I knew that going into the game, that I'm not a massive fan of the sort of sci-fi and space and everything like that. It's never really been my sort of thing. But I still thought that the game looked awesome. I mean, the same with Cyberpunk. I wasn't, a big fan of the whole futuristic style. But I still enjoyed that game. Well, I didn't, the bugs when it launched weren't great. But in terms of an actual game, I didn't think it was half bad. But yeah, I appreciated that, it's a bit hard for me to give loads of opinions on the game itself, since I genuinely knew I wouldn't be a fan of the space scene, and I'm not. It's not really my sort of thing. But there's just so much of the game I'm just disappointed by. I don't think it's lived up to its expectations. Now, I do want to cut it some slack. The game was overhyped. There's no doubt about it. It's been a long time since the game. I think Cyberpunk really was the last game to be sort of as hyped like this, really. So there was definitely that. It was definitely overhyped for what it was. but it's been in development for a very long time, and I don't think Bethesda helped themselves with the overhyping. They didn't exactly try to stop it, did they? So, you know, it's yeah, it's disappointing, but there are positives to the game. At the end of the day, it is a cool game. It's a very long game, and if you want a massive open world game, then you are getting that. But the open world feels pretty poor at times, just because of the sheer amount of loading screens. I mean, when I go anywhere really, even just to get around one entire planet, there's loading screens. So it's really disappointing that that's just how it is. But yeah, it's what we got to deal with, I guess. So yeah, look, I mean, it's not all bad. There are cool parts to the game, and you know, we're gonna get another one here. Where should we go? We'll go to the commercial district. So yeah, obviously, I suppose fast travel and everything like that, you are going to get loading screens, but it'd be cool just to have a few less. I mean, the amount of times I've seen this screen when I've been playing through the game is unreal, and I haven't actually finished the game yet, but even pretty close. I wouldn't actually know, but I'm not a big fan of all the loading screens, obviously, and it's disappointing. Now, if I was to rate the game out of 10, even without all those loading screens, it wouldn't. It's not going to be a 10. I don't think it's that close to a 10. But just because I'm not a big fan of the space theme, that's going to play a part. I'd say probably a 6 for me. For my personal experience, I'd give it a 6 out of 10. Now, the optimization isn't awful, but I have had lots of stutters and stuff like that. And I wouldn't say my PC's half bad, but obviously it is a very demanding game, so I've taken that into account. And I know on Xbox Series X, it's a pretty good experience. And generally on Series S, I think it's pretty good, considering the price of that console. So, yeah. Look, I mean, it's disappointing that it's turned out the way it has. Is it a disappointment for me? Yes. Now, is it an absolute failure? No, I wouldn't say it is a complete and utter failure, but it's definitely not lived up to its expectations. I think most people would agree with that, to be honest. I can't see how you can say it's exceeded or meted its expectations, since it just hasn't. It really hasn't. But it's not a bad game. Now, if you're thinking of picking it up, at the end of the day, it's on Game Pass, and you're getting a great game. For Game Pass, I think that's a pretty solid deal. Very solid deal, but, you know, Game Pass is an outstanding value, in my opinion. So, yeah, look, if you've got an Xbox, or you've got a PC that you think could run it, then by all means try it out if you've got Game Pass, or, you know, just get Game Pass, try it out. It's not that much. So, I'd recommend... If I'd say whether I'd recommend it or not, I don't know. I genuinely don't, since if you like Bethesda games, you'll probably get some enjoyment out of this game. I like some of the old Bethesda games. I got a bit of enjoyment out of it. If you like space-themed games, you're probably going to like this one. And if you generally like open-world RPGs, you probably find it alright. I don't think it's the best RPG out there. I think The Witcher 3 is a better RPG. I think in terms of open-world experience, Red Dead Redemption 2 still tops that for me. But that is probably, you know, that's a game I've done a countless amount of videos on over a number of channels. So, yeah, you know, there's definitely some bias with this. But at the end of the day, in my personal experience, one of the main reasons that the game didn't live up to its expectations is the loading screens. And there are other factors, but for me personally, that's just the main one. I'm not a big fan of the combat either. To be honest, there's other things about the game that I'm not a big fan of, but I feel like if it hadn't have been hyped the way it has been, and if the loading screens had been improved and they would, you know, it felt like a more open world game, and the land just looked less sort of randomly generated in places it wasn't as obvious, then I think it could have been a really, really, really successful game. But it was never going to be as successful as everyone made it out to be. It's not going to win Game of the Year, I don't think. Well, no, it won't win Game of the Year. But I don't want it to seem like I'm just being all negative, since, I mean, the idea of this video is to talk about the negatives. There's loads of positives I could talk about, since it is a really cool game. There's loads of details. It is really, really cool. There's so much content, it's unreal. And I might do a video talking about all the positives. Let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. But yeah, it's not a failure. No, that's really harsh. You can't call it a failure. But it certainly didn't meet its expectations. But yeah, it does just about wrap up things here. That's Starfield. And yeah, my opinions on the game and why some people might consider it a failure, but in my eyes it really isn't. But yeah, that does just about wrap up things here. Now, on screen you are seeing a link to a different video. Hit the link on the screen if you are interested in watching that. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.